Well, hello there once again. This is Jennifer McGuire. So lately I've been doing monoprint videos. They're faux monoprint where I take one design, ink it up, and then I spritz it with water and press it against white paper and get another design. So I'm basically getting 2 out of 1. Well, today I have a bit of a variation of that technique in which I stamp on vellum and press that against cardstock. But what's cool about this technique is I get 3 cards out of 1. Super fun to do. You can do it with a lot of different stamps, and I have a bunch of examples for you. So let's start with this trio of cards featuring the Altenew Wild Ferns stamp set. This layering stamp set creates the most realistic looking images. I'm also starting with vellum. Now you can use any type of vellum you want. I like heavyweight vellum just because it holds up nicely, but whatever you have is fine. I'm using my Scor-Buddy and a bone folder to score and create a note card from the vellum. When you score vellum, you want to make sure you really press firmly back and forth to make sure you get that good score line. I then will fold it in half and then cut that in half. And this will give me 2 top folding vellum note cards that are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. For this technique, in addition to the vellum, you will need 2 pieces of white cardstock cut to the same size. So these are 2 pieces of white cardstock at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Okay, I'm going to use a MISTI stamping tool for this technique as it really is helpful, but you could do without if you wanted to. Now I'm putting the vellum note card into my MISTI and arranging a few of the ferns. I'm doing the bottom layer, the solid most layer of these fern layering stamps. I'm positioning them onto the vellum, closing my MISTI door, and now I will stamp this with my lightest color of green ink. I'm using this set of Altenew inks. It's a new set of greens. I'm going to skip the lightest color and go with the 3 darker colors. Altenew has inks in sets of 4 so that you have light, medium, dark, and super dark. I'm using the 3 darker. So I'm stamping that on vellum, and you'll see that the ink doesn't dry right away. It kind of sits on top and stays wet for a while. Instead of just letting that dry, I'm going to do a fun technique. I have my 2 pieces of white cardstock. I'll put that in my MISTI. I'm going to ink up the same stamps that are in the same location and stamp that. Now when I do this, I'm not only stamping on this piece of white cardstock, I'm putting pressure onto the other pieces, which transfers some of that excess ink from the vellum onto that middle piece of white cardstock. Watch this. Check that out. You get like a monoprint look where you transfer some of the ink from the vellum to that cardstock. Now I'm going to repeat this until I cover that entire vellum background. There will still be some wet ink on the vellum. That's okay. It'll dry over time, or you can heat set it. So now we're going to repeat this process till we cover that vellum. So I've arranged some more ferns. I'll stamp it with that same color of green ink. You'll see that the ink doesn't dry completely right away. So we can do that press. I'm going to take those same 2 pieces of white cardstock, put them in the same orientation. Then I will ink up my stamps, stamp that onto that white cardstock, and we'll end up transferring some of that excess ink from the vellum onto the middle piece of white cardstock. So here we have 3 backgrounds going all at once. Now you could skip stamping this top one and just do the bottom 2 layers by pressing your hand on it or use some kind of rolling tool on it. But by doing this, when we stamp, we're applying that pressure and we're getting 3 pieces at once, which is just awesome. So I continued to do this process until I covered the entire card. And then I heat set my vellum, keeping my heat gun moving so I didn't warp it. That way I can be sure that the ink that is still remaining on the vellum dries completely. And here are my other 2 pieces that we've got going already. Now it's time to add the additional layers to these images to make these ferns look realistic, although you could stop here and it would look nice too. I've lined up the next layer of the ferns, and I'm stamping them with the next darkest green ink, so the medium color. You'll see the ink is very wet on the vellum, so I take my other 2 pieces, lay it right on top, ink up the stamp and stamp it again. That puts pressure onto all that paper, transferring some of that excess ink from the vellum onto that middle piece. So I'm going to continue to do this. stamping that next layer onto the vellum, then pressing the excess onto that middle piece by stamping another piece on top. Before you know it, you'll end up with a beautiful layered look. Now these ferns actually have a third layer, and I'll continue to do that third layer too. And we end up with beautiful ferns on all three pieces. And yes, it does take some time to do this, but that's because I chose layering images, and there are a few images that I'm repeating to cover an entire background. You could save time by just doing the images once and doing the layers, or you could save time by not using a layering stamp, which I'll show you examples of that later on. But the results of this stamp set are so realistic, I wanted to do it. And the best part is, even though this takes some time, I'm going to end up with 3 backgrounds for 3 cards. So for me, it's totally worth it. So I'll give you a close at each of the 3 backgrounds that we created as we make cards from them. So from the vellum note card, I have a white note card cut to the same size, and I just slide it into the vellum note card. I then use some hemp cord to tie the two together, and that's how I connect them. So basically we have a stamped vellum overlay over a white note card. It just creates a beautiful soft look. I'm using tweezers to hold the knot as I tie the bow, since I have nobody around to put their finger on it to hold it. And then I could put a little drop of liquid adhesive below the knots just so it stays put and keeps looking nice. Now I added a sentiment onto this that's very simple, and I did the same sentiment on all of these cards. I used the Mama Elephant's Sending Hugs stamp set. This is a great new set, and I really liked the small sentiments on the bottom, and I used the Just Wanted You to Know How Wonderful You Are. Now the big thanks is from a Birch Press sugar script die, where I die cut from gold cardstock, and I stacked a few die cuts together for lots of dimension. It really makes it stand out against that busy background. I also added Tonic Key Lime Nuvo drops here and there on the background of the vellum, just for little dots to fill in the open spaces. You can see how stamping on vellum gives you a soft look. Next card is the one we created with the pressed paper, the faux monoprint. This is the piece where we pressed against the vellum and took off that excess ink. And it gives you like this sketchy little textury look. It's still such a beautiful background. I trimmed it down and added it to a green note card. I used the same sentiment as I did on the last card, but this time I used green cardstock instead of gold for the thanks. Here you can get a closer look at the fun kind of texture we get using this press or monoprint technique. Now our third card is the one where we did the direct stamping, where we stamped directly onto this white cardstock. This was the piece that was on top when we did our technique. You can see how beautiful those wild fern images are. So realistic looking. And you can see how vibrant and beautiful those green inks are. I again used the same sugar script thanks die cut and the Mama Elephant stamped image for the sentiment below. Okay, let's do another trio of cards using this technique. Now in this case, I end up again with a vellum card, then our faux monoprint card where we press the excess ink onto it, and then our full stamp card that we created just to help the process along. I'll be using the Right at Home Freshly Picked stamp set. This is a large stamp set with lots of simple layering images. I'm going to be using it to create a background today. However, keep in mind you can use this to create an amazing bouquet where you can have this dimensional looking banner with a sentiment on it, or the little wrap image to look like a newspaper wrap holding your bouquet together. There's a lot you can get out of this gorgeous stamp set, but again, today I'm sticking with the backgrounds. So I'm starting again with a vellum note card. This time it is a side folding vellum note card, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I've arranged some of the solid leaf images into my MISTI, and I'm stamping it with the lightest green ink from that same cluster of Altenew inks that I showed you earlier. Now there is that excess wet ink, so I have 2 pieces of white cardstock that I'm putting on top. Going to ink up the stamps again, and then press that down. When I do that, I'm stamping the ink onto this top piece, and also transferring some of the excess ink from the vellum piece onto the middle piece of white cardstock. Now this took me some time. I will admit it took me a while to do these layers, but I was so crazy about the end results and the fact that I end up with 3 backgrounds, that it was definitely worth it to me. I went through and I did a bunch of the bottom leaf images, the most solid leaf images. Then I moved on to different flowers. I did different colors of ink. I changed it up each time. But for each of these bottom layers, I used the softest color of ink. So I used the softest green, the softest yellow, the softest pink. That way, I can add the second layers in a slightly darker color. But one thing that's very important to keep in mind, when you're stamping on vellum, the colors are going to end up lighter than the true ink color. So don't go super light with your inks or you won't be able to see them on the vellum. And by the way, I used Altenew inks today just because I really like their ink collection, but you could definitely use any dye ink for this technique. So I continued to do stamping in different colors until I covered the entire background. Now let's take a look at it. Here's our vellum version. You can see how much softer it is compared to that regular stamp version, and our monoprint is in between. Now it's time to add the layering or the detail images from this stamp set onto these leaves and flowers. So I'm lining up the detail images. This time I'll stamp it in a slightly darker ink, so just 1 ink darker. And then we can continue with our technique, doing the exact same thing that I've been showing you. So I continued on adding details to all of the flowers, and this is what we end up with. 3 pieces. We have the vellum, we have the monoprint, and then we have the solid stamping that we did. I love all of these backgrounds. They're so different and can be used to create 3 cards. Okay, so let's make those cards. I'm starting with the vellum. I used my anti-static powder tool. And now I'm stamping that Sending Hugs Mama Elephant sentiment right in the center. And then I'm adding Ranger Black Superfine Detail Embossing Powder. I let my heat gun get good and hot, and now I'm heat embossing it. And that's what I'm going to do to this card. I'm going to keep it simple since we have so much beautiful stamping on the vellum and that great sentiment in the center. I cut a white note card to the same size, and now I'm going to put that inside of the vellum. Again, I'll use string to tie these together. This time I'm using a silver cording. There are many ways you can attach the vellum to the note card, but by doing this, we keep the vellum kind of as an overlay over the white note card. The white allows the color to show up more on the vellum, and it gives us a spot to write a sentiment on the inside. Once again, notice how light the stamping is on our vellum. That's because when you stamp on vellum, not all of the ink absorbs. So you get a much softer look, and keep that in mind when you're choosing your ink colors. Now here is the second card from this trio. This one features the background that we pressed that excess ink from the vellum onto, so our faux monoprint piece. I love the texture and that unique look that you get with this technique. I trimmed that piece down and added it to a soft gray note card. This is Simon's Stamp Fog Cardstock. Then I decorated this with the Ink on 3 Blessings stamp set and die set. I'm crazy about this stamp set. I just love the sentiments on it. I die cut across from the same fog cardstock and covered it with a little bit of shimmer from my Spectrum Noir shimmer pen. I stamped Walk in Faith with black ink onto a die cut white circle, and I added that onto the front of our card. I wanted to keep everything soft so that I would end up with a really soft looking card in the end. And now we have our third piece. This is the piece where we did our stamping just to help with the process. You can see how vibrant it is compared to the vellum. I trimmed it down and added it to a black note card. And then I used a Papertrey Love die to die cut 3 love die cuts. I glued them on top of each other for dimension. And then I added glossy accents on top just for lots of shine. I also white heat embossed the sentiment that says "and happy thoughts." And that's from that Mama Elephant stamp set that I showed you earlier. And I glued it right below the love. I also added white cardstock on the inside so I could write a personal message there. You can see how much fun these stamps are, and the fact that we got 3 really different looking backgrounds from one technique. I love any technique that allows me to create multiple cards at once. Okay, now we have another set of cards. This time I'm using a stamp set that I've wanted to use for a while, and I'm really excited about it. In this case, I'm using softer colors and detailed stamps just to show you the difference. This is the Technique Tuesday Mandala stamp set, and there is also a Mandala die. I'm just going to use this stamp set today, but you have circles of images that you can stamp together in different colors to create something really beautiful. It also has sentiments that fit perfectly in the middle. Once again, I'm starting with a vellum note card, and I have one of those mandala images, and I'm stamping it with a teal ink. You can see it's very soft and very detailed, but I'm still going to do the technique with the 2 pieces of white cardstock on top, and I'll stamp the same image in the same place. This applies pressure and transfers some of the ink from the vellum to the piece of cardstock that's in the middle. Now, when you're using a detailed image like this, you won't get as much ink transferring, of course. And I'm using pretty light colored inks, so I'm going to end up with a light vellum piece and a light monoprint piece, but that's okay. It ends up with soft backgrounds, and if I wanted to, I could use brighter color inks and get more intense results. Here I double stamp the Lawn Fawn Celery Stick ink color just to make it a little bit darker. So here I go, I'm putting the 2 pieces on top, stamping onto that, transferring some of the ink to the piece in between. So I'm going to continue to do this till I have a background of these fun circles in different colors. I'll tell you, I haven't had as much fun with this stamp set in a long time. There's just something really nice about the detail of these stamps. So here's the vellum piece that I ended up with. It's very soft, and I really like that soft look. It's something really different. Now here is the regular white cardstock where we did the regular stamping, and on the left is the monoprint, so you can see the in-between version. I actually saved that monoprint for a future video. I wasn't sure what to do with it, so I'm just going to use the regular stamped version and the vellum in today's video. So on the vellum, I did the exact same thing that I did before. I added the sending hugs sentiment right in the center, but this time instead of tying string around, I'm putting a thin strip of double-sided tape on the inside back of my vellum, and I'm adding a white note card in between. That way my vellum stays on to the white note card, but it's still an overlay and it can move freely on the front. You can see that soft stamping that we get because inks end up softer on vellum, and we pressed some of the excess ink off of it onto our extra piece. I wish this showed up better in the photos in the video, but it's beautiful in real life. Here's the card that I created with the regular stamped piece. I added gemstones and a hello die cut to the center. Again, I'm saving the monoprint version for a future project. So you can see how beautiful the detail is with this stamp set. Can't wait to do more in different color combinations. Okay, now the next trio of cards I have with this technique are some underwater looking cards. So you can see the vellum background on this one. That's where I used that monoprint technique. Here's the monoprint version, and then we have the solid version. You can see each varies quite differently in how dark of a result you get. For the technique, I'm using the Papertrey Ink Ocean Stamp Set. So these are layering ocean images. You can use the thin border images to create land that you see out on the ocean, or you can use it just to create more waves. I'm going to use it in a very basic way today. Keep in mind that this can be used to create much more beautiful results. However, I just wanted to use them for backgrounds today. On these cards, I'll also be using the Fauna stamp set. I just think these are the cutest little fish and turtles and sea life, and they also are beautiful at the same time. They're very easy to layer and give realistic results. So I'll use those to decorate my cards, and I'm excited to finally use this set because I've been wanting to use it for some time now. And for the sentiments, I'll be using the Papertrey Ink Salt Air Sentiment Stamp Set. There are some really fun and unique sentiments to go along with your fish images in the set, and I'm excited about them. So as before, I'm starting with a vellum note card in my MISTI stamping tool. I'm inking the base layer of the ocean with Altenew Volcano Lake ink and stamping it firmly onto my vellum. You'll see that the ink is very wet when I remove it. That's okay. I'll take those 2 pieces of white cardstock of the same size, line them up with the vellum note card, and I'll stamp the same image again. The pressure from this stamping will transfer some of the ink from the vellum to that middle piece. You can repeat this process if you need to. Now to cover the rest of this vellum note card, I'm just going to flip it over and stamp the same image again. It's not really how it's meant to use these ocean images, but it worked just fine. And that way I was able to cover the entire background with ocean. And you can see by using bigger stamps, I'm able to do this technique much faster and create 3 backgrounds at once. So there's the vellum, you can see the monoprint over there on the right, and then our solid image was the one on top. Okay, now it's time to line up the next layer of that ocean from the Papertrey ink stamp. And I'll do the same process. I'll stamp first on the vellum, then put the 2 pieces of white cardstock on top, and then stamp it again. Keep in mind when you're lining up your second layer of stamps, sometimes it's easier to line it up with your regular stamped piece, not the vellum piece because it's easier to see, but then you can switch and first stamp on the vellum. Okay, I repeated the process, stamping on the other half just like before. Again, I'm not really using the stamp set how it was intended, but in the end, it worked out just fine. And you can see how realistic your waves end up being. Okay, so here are my 3 final pieces. I'm just heat setting them with my heat gun so they're good and dry. We have the vellum on the left, the monoprint or pressed version on the right, and in the middle we have the original stamp version. This trio of cards really shows the difference between the 3 pieces. They are each pretty unique in how dark they are and the look that you get. Okay, so here are the final cards. This is the original stamped one where I just did stamping on the cardstock to help with the technique. I added a white rectangle to the center, and then a few of the fish that I created with that Fauna stamp set from Papertrey that I showed you. Those are the cutest little images, so we have the seahorse and the 2 fish. For bubbles, I use the Nuvo drops, and I just put little drops here and there, just for a little bit of an accent. Here's the card that uses the middle piece, and you can see that fun texture that we get. I added a white rectangle with one of the sentiments from the stamp set that I showed you earlier, and a fun little turtle. I kept this one very simple because I wanted to show a lot of that textury looking stamping that we get in the background with this vellum faux monoprint technique. And then finally we have the vellum version. I added it over a white note card as I showed you earlier. I put a white circle die cut on it along with 2 turtles and a stamped sentiment. On that white circle die cut, I added some little faux piercing details using this Poppy Stamps Pinpoint Rings die set. You can see those little tiny dots that we have going around that circle edge. I also added a few gemstones for bubbles. So you can see how soft that stamping is on the vellum. It's really pretty. So there you have lots of examples showing how to get more from your stamps and your vellum by doing this kind of faux vellum monoprint technique. I hope you'll give it a try. It works great with any dye inks, any vellum, and any stamps you may have. If you're interested in the particular supplies I use, they are linked below in that YouTube description. In the middle are a couple other related videos that you might find interesting. Please hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, I got to thank you for spending your time with me today. I hope you have a great week and have some time to try this out. Thanks so much for watching.